Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. The majority of European countries and the EU's Justice Chief have called on Hungary to revise its legislation regarding a contentious pride ban. This in Budapest, other recent behaviour, which ostensibly contravenes EU law, sits at the core of high-level discussions in the European capital on Tuesday. Our EU correspondent from Brussels has more.
The 7-year debate regarding whether the EU should move forward with Article 7 proceedings against Hungary, which could effectively strip Budapest of its voting rights in the European Union, rages on for another day. Now, EU affairs ministers have met in Brussels on Tuesday for a General Affairs Council where the black sheep of the EU, that is Budapest, sits at the core of those discussions. But according to our EU sources here in Brussels, the numbers just aren't there to move forward with those Article 7 proceedings, as a fourth-fifth majority is needed and not enough member states support this proposal. But we have heard that movement may come from the European Commission. The EU Justice Commissioner Michael McGrath said that he was considering launching infringement proceedings against Budapest if that country moves forward with that controversial transparency bill. It comes off the back of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban effectively banning LGBTQI+ gay pride events, such as an occasion that just took place over the weekend. But let's take a listen to what that Justice Chief had to say from the Belgian capital on Tuesday.
The right to gather freely and peacefully is one that must be upheld at all times, and so as a Commission we are very closely examining the particular law that has led to this ban. As you know, we have already initiated the infringement proceedings in relation to the so-called child protection law. We have very strong views on that and we await the court judgment, but we're not ruling out any option at this time in relation to that matter.
Speaking of that ban dubbed the child protection law, a majority of EU member states late on Monday night signed a letter calling on the European Commission to use whatever is in its rule of law toolbox to crack down on Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for its gay pride ban. But among the list of names, Poland was absent. Let's take a listen to what the EU Affairs Minister from Poland, Adam Szłapka, had to say when pressed on this matter by TVP World.
As a presidency, we shouldn't do it, I think.
Now, Minister Szłapka is, of course, referring to Poland's EU Council presidency, which started at the beginning of the year and winds up at the end of June. But despite this statement, many here in the Belgian capital are wondering whether Poland would sign the letter if it was able to. But speaking of diverging opinions, we heard from the Hungarian EU Affairs Minister János Bokar defending this legislative decision, stating that there is no pride ban in Hungary. Let's take a listen to his explanation in Brussels.
There is no such thing in Hungary as a pride ban. Today's hearing will allow me the opportunity to explain to my colleagues the constitutional and the legal framework. I hope that after these discussions, my colleagues around the table will walk out with a more nuanced view on the Hungarian legislation.
Yes, so we will hear the outcomes of that alleged nuanced conversation at a press conference scheduled for later in the day, where we're hoping for some outcomes. But again, we're not expecting the dial to be shifted regarding that Article 7 proceedings, but we're hoping perhaps for a change. But what is clear is that the EU has withheld 18 billion euros in funds for Budapest, continuously contravening EU law. So we'll have to wait and see whether that Justice Commissioner will go through with his threat of going to the courts once again. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
TVP World also spoke to the former Hungarian foreign minister to gain insight on the possible outcomes of the discussion.
This is one of the many meetings going on since 2018, when, on the request of the European Parliament, the Council started to apply the Article 7 procedure on Hungary. These are investigative meetings, putting questions to the representative of the Hungarian government, examining various aspects of the rule of law. this is a very slow motion picture. I have hopes that maybe the Polish presidency could speed up that procedure, but we know that the Article 7 is a very difficult procedure because we a big majority, 4/5 of all the member states, to state the serious threat of the rule of law in Hungary, and we would need full unanimity at the end of the day in order to apply real sanctions. This is a good public investigation, but I'm afraid that it would never get until real sanctions because of the rule of law problems in Hungary.
The European Union has approved a €150 billion defence loan instrument amid continued threats from Russia. The initiative will offer loans that will not count toward EU fiscal spending limits.
The final agreement between member states says that the threats posed by Russia and Belarus are of particular urgency and relevance. Additionally, the document states that it is vital for the EU to support other member states as soon as possible so that they can place orders very rapidly. The Security Action for Europe loan instrument is meant to shore up EU's defense industry through financing weapon procurement. According to EU Defense Commissioner Andrius Kubilius, the EU would effectively double the volume of weapons Ukraine receives through investing in domestic arms manufacturing.
Polish President Andrzej Duda has been welcomed in Berlin by his German counterpart Frank-Walter Steinmeier. Duda and Poland's First Lady, Agata Kornhauser-Duda, were received at the Schloss Bellevue Palace with military honors. The two presidents are set to hold discussions on commemorations for Polish victims of World War II, Polish-German cooperation and migration. After 2 5-year terms in office, Duda said earlier that his visit to Berlin would provide an opportunity for him to thank President Steinmeier for years of good relations and commitment to Polish-German issues. Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski will represent the European Union during a 4-day visit to Sri Lanka that starts on Wednesday. The role has been bestowed upon Sikorski because Poland currently holds the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. He is due to meet with several key Sri Lankan leaders, including his counterpart Vijita Herath. During the trip, Sikorski will also deliver a lecture at the Laksham Kadir Mar Institute of International Relations and Strategic Studies on Poland's experience of political transformation.
What foreign troops may be.
Russia is preparing new offensive operations, said Volodymyr Zelensky following a briefing with Ukrainian intelligence. According to the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Putin is not interested in peace and instead is counting on prolonging the war.
From the intelligence gathered and open source data, we see that Putin and his inner circle do not plan to end the war. There is no indication that they are seriously considering peace or diplomacy. On the contrary, there are many signs that they are preparing new offensive operations. Russia is counting on continued warfare. This is a blatant disregard for everyone in the world who seeks peace and is trying to make diplomacy effective. I am sure our partners' intelligence services also have this information and see these facts, and it is important that they do not turn a blind eye but report them to their leadership.
Latvian officials called on European Union members to suspend visas for Russian citizens. The move is a response to the rising concerns of a possible Moscow-backed sabotage plot across Europe.
Latvia's Foreign Minister Baiba Braža urged EU member states to stop issuing visas to Russian citizens, citing serious security concerns. In her statement, Braža pointed out that the number of Schengen visas issued to Russians rose by 1/4 in 2024 compared to 2023. European countries, Poland and Latvia included, have accused Russia of orchestrating a series of sabotage efforts, cyber attacks, and arson across the EU. According to EU officials, the threat has intensified following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Anti-government protesters gathered in Tbilisi on Monday as the country marked its Independence Day, with opposition supporters gathering in front of the parliament building to hear from former President Salome Zurabishvili.
Anti-government protesters gathered in Tbilisi on Monday as the country marked its Independence Day, with opposition supporters gathering in front of the parliament building to hear from former President Salome Zurabishvili. Georgia's various opposition forces organized marches in the capital Tbilisi on Independence Day. Protests against the ruling Moscow-friendly Georgian Dream Party have continued since the 2024 parliamentary elections, with citizens angered by the new government's plan to pause EU accession talks until 2028. Georgia had been an official accession EU candidate since December 2023, but Brussels froze talks after the government passed several questionable bills, including one similar to a Russian law, which requires NGOs and media outlets receiving more than 20% of their funding from foreign sources to register with the Ministry of Justice as organizations serving the interests of a foreign power.
Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Russia's war in Ukraine will likely continue for some time because of Moscow's reluctance to enter meaningful peace talks. Merz was speaking at a press conference hosted by Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo.
I did not have any illusions from the start that this would go very quickly, but we have made an attempt, which has also reached the Vatican. And if the Russian side is not even ready to accept an invitation from the Vatican or to accept a message from the Vatican to come to a meeting in another territory, then this shows that Putin and Russia obviously have no interest in coming to a ceasefire or even to a peace treaty. And that means, in consequence, that Ukraine has to defend itself and that we have to strengthen our efforts even more so that Ukraine can defend itself. And I keep pointing out that if you look at history, how wars end, they usually end with economic or military exhaustion of one or both sides. And we are obviously still far from that in this war. And that is why I expect that we may have to adjust to a longer period of time.
Celebrations turned to chaos in Liverpool after a car ploughed into spectators gathered for Liverpool FC's Premier League victory parade. Dozens were injured and a 53-year-old man is now in police custody as investigators scramble to understand how a vehicle reached a street that had been closed to traffic.
Shortly after 6 p.m. local time on Monday and close to the parade's final stretch on Water Street, a car broke into the pedestrian zone and ploughed into spectators. Witnesses reported that the vehicle accelerated, knocking people to the ground and forcing others to leap aside. The event prompted a comment from the British Prime Minister.
The scenes in Liverpool are appalling. My thoughts are with all those injured or affected. I want to thank the police and emergency services for their swift and ongoing response to this shocking incident.
First responders described the harrowing scene and police are now probing how the car breached the pedestrian zone.
On arrival, the crews were met with numerous injured people and 4 persons trapped under a vehicle. Our crews rapidly lifted the vehicle, removed 3 adults and 1 child from beneath and passed them to our ambulance service colleagues.
According to North West Ambulance Service, 47 people were injured.
Sadly, 4 of the injured were children who were enjoying the day with their friends and their families. We can confirm that our teams treated 20 patients at the scene for minor injuries, and these did not need hospital treatment. 27 patients in total were taken to hospital by ambulance, and we believe 2 of those, including one of the children, have sustained serious injuries.
Authorities say the crash does not appear terrorist-related. Police have confirmed only that the arrested driver is a 53-year-old British national. His identity and possible motive remain undisclosed as detectives piece together why a day of football triumph ended in tragedy.
The best European footballer Cristiano Ronaldo is leaving his current club AlNasr. The 40-year-old's contract expires at the end of June and, as stated by Ronaldo on his social media, will not be renewed. Yesterday evening, Ronaldo posted a tweet in which he said this chapter of his career is closed. At the same time, the Portuguese footballer stated that the rest of his story is still being written. The 40-year-old striker is currently preparing for the next year's World Cup, which will be his record 6th tournament. So far, the future of Ronaldo's club career is not known. However, speculations regarding his next destinations flooded the internet. Among the clubs listed as interested in the player are London's Chelsea, his former club Manchester United, and the club where he played football as a child, Sporting Lisbon. And this brings us to the end of Midday Report. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.